The collection that should not exist. The discovery that changed everything. The Vraxian Empire had conquered 847 star systems in their 3,000-year expansion across the galaxy. They had seen every type of civilization, from primitive tribes to advanced federations. They had faced resistance, diplomacy, and everything in between. But they had never encountered anything like what they found orbiting the dead human colony of New Terra. Admiral Zekthor stood on the bridge of the Imperial flagship Dominance, staring at the structure that hung in space like a monument to madness. It was massive, easily the size of a small moon, constructed from what appeared to be transparent crystal and dark metal. Lights moved within it, soft and steady, as if the structure was alive and breathing. "What is that thing?" his tactical officer asked, mandibles clicking nervously. "Unknown," Zekthor replied. "Scan it." The scans came back immediately, and the results made no sense. The structure was ancient, at least 200 years old, yet it was powered and maintained. Life support systems were active. Gravity generators hummed with steady power. But there were no life signs, no crew, no defense systems. "It's a station," the science officer said slowly. "But I've never seen architecture like this. The humans built it, the signature matches their construction methods, but the design is unlike anything in our database." Zekthor studied the readings carefully. The structure had no weapons that he could detect. No shields, no military installations, no obvious purpose at all. It simply existed, orbiting a dead world where the human colony had been exterminated 50 years ago during the Vraxian Empire's systematic elimination of human space. The Museum of Extinction. "Send a boarding party," Zekthor ordered. "I want to know what this is." 2 hours later, a team of Vraxian soldiers floated through the docking port and entered the mysterious structure. Their helmet cameras transmitted everything back to the flagship. What they found inside made Zekthor's blood run cold. The interior was vast, with corridors that stretched for kilometers in perfect straight lines. The walls were lined with glass cases, thousands of them, each one containing objects. And every single object was human. "What is this place?" one soldier whispered. The team moved deeper, their cameras capturing everything. Clothing from different human cultures hung in perfectly preserved displays. Ancient books filled entire rooms, protected behind environmental shields. Musical instruments, children's toys, medical equipment, artwork, cooking tools, religious symbols, and countless other items were arranged with meticulous care. Each display had a small plaque written in human language and translated into the common galactic script. The soldiers read them as they passed. "Wedding dress, Earth region North America, circa 2247. Worn by Maria Santos on the day of her marriage. Represents the human tradition of ceremonial bonding. Violin, handcrafted by the Chen Family Workshop, Mars Colony, 2301. Music is humanity's way of expressing emotions that words cannot capture. Child stuffed bear, belonging to Emma Rodriguez, age 6, New Terra Colony. Humans form emotional attachments to objects that provide comfort during development. It's a museum, the team leader said, his voice filled with confusion and something else, something that might have been guilt. The humans built a museum. The message from the dead. The team continued deeper into the structure, past rooms filled with human history, human culture, human memory. They found displays showing human evolution, from primitive stone tools to faster-than-light spacecraft. They found art galleries filled with paintings and sculptures that captured human joy, sorrow, anger, and hope. And then they found the central chamber. It was a sphere, 100 meters in diameter, and every centimeter of its surface was covered with holographic displays. Millions of human faces looked down at them, each one frozen in a moment of life. Children laughing. Elders smiling. Soldiers standing proud. Scientists working. Artists creating. Families embracing. In the center of the sphere floated a single holographic message, written in letters 10 meters tall. To whoever finds this, we were here. We existed. We mattered. Do not let us be forgotten. Below that, in smaller text. This is the archive of humanity. Built in the year 2348 by the remaining human colonies as our final act before extinction. We knew we would lose the war against the Vraxian Empire. We knew our species would be erased. But we refused to let our existence vanish without trace. This archive contains everything we were, our history, our culture, our dreams, our mistakes, our achievements. We built this not as a weapon, not as a plea, but as a witness. Because even if no one remembers us, even if the galaxy forgets we ever existed, this place will remember. We were human. We were here. And we mattered. The soldier's camera lingered on the message for a long moment before the team leader spoke. Admiral, you need to see this. The weight of memory. Back on the flagship, Admiral Zekthor watched the footage in silence. His command crew stood around him, equally quiet. The holographic displays showed room after room of human memory, preserved with obsessive care and powered by reactors designed to last 10,000 years. They knew they would die, Zekthor said quietly. And instead of fighting to the last breath, they built this. Why? His tactical officer asked. What purpose does it serve? It has no weapons, no strategic value. It's just memories. That's exactly the point, the science officer said, her voice thoughtful. Humans didn't build this to fight us. They built it so that someone, someday, would know they existed. Zekthor felt something uncomfortable stirring in his chest. The Vraxian Empire had destroyed 16 human colonies over the past century. They had done so efficiently, systematically, without hesitation. Humans were a threat to Vraxian expansion, so they were eliminated. It was logical. It was necessary. It was how empires survived. But the Empire had never bothered to learn who the humans actually were. They were just another obstacle to remove, another species to conquer. The Vraxians had destroyed human cities, human ships, human lives, but they had never stopped to understand what they were destroying. The question that haunted. Admiral, the communications officer said suddenly. I'm receiving a transmission from inside the structure. It's automated, triggered by our presence. Play it, Zekthor ordered. A holographic figure appeared above the command console. It was a human woman, elderly, with gray hair and tired eyes. She wore simple clothing and stood in what appeared to be the central chamber of the archive. My name is Dr. Sarah Chen, the recording said. I am the last director of the Archive of Humanity. If you are watching this, it means the archive has been discovered. It means someone found us, even though we are gone. The hologram paused, and Chen's expression became intense, almost fierce. I do not know who you are or what species you represent. I do not know if you destroyed us or simply found our ruins. But I want you to understand something very important. You did not just kill humans when you eliminated our colonies. You killed everything we were. Our stories. Our songs. Our dreams. Our love. Our hope. Everything that made us unique in this vast universe. Chen gestured around her at the archive. We built this place because we refused to let that be the end. We refused to let our existence be erased as if we never mattered. Every object in this archive represents a human life, a human moment, a human meaning. We are preserving ourselves not as soldiers or enemies or threats, but as people. As a species that laughed and cried and wondered about the stars. The hologram's expression softened slightly. I hope whoever finds this takes the time to walk these halls. To see what we were. To understand what was lost. Not because we want your pity or your guilt, but because we want to be remembered. Because being remembered is the only immortality any species can hope for. Chen smiled sadly. We were human. We were here. And even if the entire galaxy forgets, this place will remember. Thank you for listening. The recording ended. The bridge remained silent. The Admiral's choice. Zekthor stared at the space where the hologram had been. Around him, his crew shifted uncomfortably. They were warriors, trained to see enemies and threats. They were not prepared to see people, to understand what they had helped destroy. "What should we do with it, Admiral?" the tactical officer asked. "Should we destroy the structure?" Zekthor thought about that question for a long moment. The logical choice was yes. The archive served no purpose for the Empire. It was a memorial to a dead species, a reminder of conquest. Destroying it would be simple and clean. But Zekthor found himself thinking about the millions of faces in the central chamber. The children laughing. The elders smiling. The ordinary moments of ordinary lives, now preserved in crystal and light. "No," he said finally. "We will not destroy it." His crew looked at him in surprise. "But Admiral," the tactical officer began. "We will not destroy it," Zekthor repeated, his voice firm. "And we will not report its existence to the Empire. As far as the official record is concerned, we found nothing of value in this system." "Why?" the science officer asked quietly. Zekthor looked at the structure on the view screen, at the soft lights moving within it like thoughts or memories or dreams. "Because they were right," he said. "They mattered. And someone should remember that." He turned to his communications officer. "Send a message to all Vraxian ships in this sector. This system is off limits. Navigation hazard. No vessels are to approach within 10 light years. Make it official." "Yes, Admiral." As the Dominants prepared to leave the system, Zekthor took one last look at the archive of humanity. It would float there in the darkness, powered and preserved, waiting for the next species to discover it. Waiting to tell its story again and again, for as long as the reactors lasted. The ripple begins. What Admiral Zekthor didn't know was that his was not the first Vraxian ship to discover the archive. 3 others had found it over the past decade, and each commander had made the same choice: to protect it, to hide it, to let it survive. And what none of them knew was that the archive was one of 12 identical structures hidden throughout the galaxy, each one preserving human memory, each one waiting to be found. Dr. Chen and her team had built them knowing that one discovery might be destroyed or ignored. But 12? 12 archives scattered across different sectors, different trade routes, different corners of space? 12 chances to be remembered. 12 seeds of memory planted in the dark. And somewhere in deep space, on a hidden human colony that had survived by staying invisible, Chen's daughter read the reports from automated monitoring systems and smiled. The archives were doing their job. Humanity might be defeated, but they would not be forgotten. And being remembered, as her mother had said, was a kind of victory all its own, the empire that learned to remember. The change that started small. 6 months after Admiral Zekthor's discovery, strange things began happening throughout the Vraxian Empire. Small things at first, barely noticeable, but persistent. Vraxian soldiers returning from patrol near the Archive of Humanity started acting differently. They were quieter, more thoughtful. Some requested transfers to non-combat positions. Others began studying human language in their off hours, reading the translated texts available in the Imperial database. Commander Velkan was one of them. She had been part of the boarding party that first entered the archive, and she couldn't stop thinking about what she'd seen. The wedding dress. The violin. The child's stuffed bear. Objects that meant nothing to Vraxian military strategy but meant everything to the people who had owned them. She started visiting the archive again on her own time, walking the silent corridors, reading the plaques, studying the faces in the central chamber. And slowly, without really intending to, she began to understand what humanity had been. The museum's secret. What Velkan didn't realize was that the archive had been designed with this exact purpose in mind. Dr. Chen and her team had built it not just as a memorial, but as a teaching tool. The layout, the selection of objects, the way displays were arranged, all of it was carefully crafted to create empathy in whoever walked through. The archive showed humans not as warriors or threats, but as people. Parents who loved their children. Artists who created beauty. Scientists who sought knowledge. Ordinary individuals living ordinary lives, finding meaning in small moments and simple joys. It was impossible to walk through the archive and still see humans as just another conquered species. The more time someone spent there, the more they began to see humanity as real, as valuable, as worthy of existence. And that was exactly what Chen had intended. The soldier who questioned. Delkin wasn't the only one affected. Across the Imperial fleet, soldiers who had visited the archive began having conversations they'd never had before. They started questioning things that had always seemed obvious. "We destroyed 16 human colonies," Delkin said one night in the crew quarters, speaking to her fellow soldiers. "But did we have to? Were they really a threat, or did we just assume they were because that's what empires do?" "It was war," another soldier replied, but his voice lacked conviction. "They would have done the same to us." "Would they?" Delkin pulled up an image on her datapad. It showed a human hospital ship that Vraxian forces had destroyed during the war. The ship had been marked with medical symbols, clearly designated as non-combat, but it had been eliminated anyway as part of standard military protocol. "This ship was evacuating wounded civilians," Delkin said quietly. "Children. The sick. The elderly. We destroyed it because regulations said all human vessels were valid targets. But after seeing the archive, after understanding who those people were..." She trailed off. "I'm not sure we were right." The conversation spread. Other soldiers joined in, sharing their own doubts, their own questions. For the first time in Vraxian military history, soldiers were questioning whether conquest was always justified. The Admiral's dilemma. Admiral Zekthor heard about these conversations and felt a deep unease. He had protected the archive because it seemed like the right thing to do, but he hadn't anticipated this consequence. The archive wasn't just preserving human memory, it was changing Vraxian perspectives. He called Commander Velkan to his office. She stood at attention, expecting punishment for her questioning. Instead, Zekthor said, "Tell me honestly, Commander. After visiting the archive, do you still believe the elimination of human colonies was necessary?" Velkan hesitated. Answering honestly could end her career or worse. But the faces from the archive haunted her, millions of humans who had lived and loved and dreamed, now gone forever. "No, Admiral," she said quietly. "I don't. I think we destroyed something irreplaceable, and we didn't even bother to understand what we were losing." Zekthor was silent for a long moment. Then he said something that shocked Velkan completely. "I agree with you. The discovery of others." Over the following months, more archives were discovered. A trading vessel found one near an abandoned mining colony. A science expedition stumbled across another in a nebula. Each time, the discovering crew reported it to their commanders, and each time, those commanders made the same choice Zekthor had made: protect it, hide it, preserve it. The Imperial High Command eventually noticed the pattern of navigation hazard warnings appearing around former human territories. They sent an investigator to determine what was being hidden. Investigator Krextal was a career officer, loyal to the Empire, skeptical of sentiment. When he arrived at the first archive location, he expected to find military installations or weapons caches. Instead, he found memory. He spent 3 days walking through the archive of humanity. He read thousands of plaques. He studied hundreds of displays. He watched the holographic recording of Dr. Chen's message 5 times, each viewing making him more uncomfortable. On the 4th day, he submitted his report to the High Command. His recommendation shocked everyone: the archive should be preserved and open to the public. The report that changed policy. The humans built these structures knowing they would die, Krextal's report stated. They invested their final resources not in weapons or revenge, but in ensuring they would be remembered. This demonstrates a fundamental aspect of their psychology that we failed to understand during the war: humans value meaning over survival. They would rather die remembered than live forgotten. He continued, by destroying human colonies without understanding their culture, we may have created a strategic vulnerability. Other species witnessing our actions will see us as genocidal and culturally ignorant. They will fear us, yes, but they will also unite against us. The humans built these archives not just for themselves, but as a message to the galaxy. This is what was lost. This is what happens when empires conquer without understanding. The report concluded, I recommend we preserve these archives and allow our citizens to visit them. Not as museums of conquest, but as reminders that every species we encounter has value beyond military threat assessment. Understanding who we face makes us better strategists, better diplomats, and better representatives of Vraxian civilization. The High Command's decision. The Imperial High Command debated for weeks. Some argued the archives should be destroyed to eliminate their influence on Vraxian soldiers. Others argued they should be studied as psychological warfare examples. But Fleet Commander Zorthek, the highest-ranking military officer in the Empire, made a surprising decision. Preserve them all, he ordered. And make them accessible to any Vraxian citizen who wishes to visit. Furthermore, I'm ordering a comprehensive review of our conquest protocols. Before we eliminate any species in the future, we will document their culture, their achievements, their unique contributions to galactic civilization. If we must conquer, we will do so with full understanding of what we're taking from the universe. The decision shocked the Empire. Hardliners called it weakness. Reformers called it wisdom. But it became official policy. The Vraxian Empire would no longer erase species without understanding them first. The unexpected consequence. What happened next surprised everyone. As Vraxian citizens began visiting the archives, something fundamental shifted in Imperial culture. People who had never questioned military policy began asking difficult questions. Artists began creating works inspired by human creativity. Philosophers debated the ethics of conquest. The archives of humanity became the most visited locations in former human space. Millions of Vraxians walked through the corridors, reading about human weddings and human music and human children's toys. They saw the millions of faces in the central chambers and understood, perhaps for the first time, that conquest meant death, death of individuals, death of cultures, death of irreplaceable meaning. The Empire didn't collapse. It didn't abandon expansion entirely. But it changed. Conquest became more careful, more considered, more selective. Species that posed no actual threat were left alone. Cultures were studied and preserved even when colonies were absorbed into the Empire. Vraxian soldiers learned the names and stories of those they fought against. The message reaches further. The existence of the archives of humanity spread beyond Vraxian space. Other species learned about them and came to visit. The archives became neutral territory, protected by mutual agreement among multiple empires and federations. Alien visitors walked through human memory and saw themselves reflected back. They remembered their own lost cultures, their own destroyed colonies, their own forgotten peoples. The archives became not just a memorial to humanity, but a reminder to all species about the cost of forgetting. And in the central chamber of each archive, Dr. Chen's holographic message played on an endless loop, telling her story to thousands of different species in hundreds of different languages. The colony that survived. On a hidden world at the edge of known space, the last surviving human colony monitored broadcasts from Vraxian space. They watched as their archives changed the empire that had tried to eliminate them. They saw Vraxian culture shift, policies change, perspectives transform. Governor Martinez, daughter of Dr. Sarah Chen, stood in the colony's command center and smiled. Mother would have been proud, she said quietly. Will we reveal ourselves? Her aide asked. Let the galaxy know some humans survived? Martinez considered. The colony was small, just 50,000 people hidden on a world the Vraxians had never thoroughly scanned. They had survived through secrecy and caution, never transmitting, never traveling, never taking risks. Not yet, Martinez decided. We're still too vulnerable. But the archives are doing what Mother designed them to do, making the galaxy remember us, making them think about what they destroy. In another generation or two, when attitudes have shifted further, then we can emerge. We can rebuild. She looked at the monitoring screens showing Vraxian citizens walking through the archives, reading about human culture, learning human history. Right now, we're more powerful as a memory than we would be as a species, she said. Memories can't be conquered. They can only be forgotten or remembered. And we've made sure the galaxy will remember. The legacy of memory. 50 years later, the Vraxian Empire encountered another species that posed a military threat. This time, instead of immediately planning elimination, the Empire sent cultural researchers first. They spent 2 years studying the species, documenting their achievements, understanding their unique contributions to galactic diversity. When military action became unavoidable, the conflict was limited and precise. The species' military was neutralized, but their culture was preserved, their civilians protected, their history documented and respected. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't even particularly kind. But it was different from before. The Empire had learned to remember. And in the archives of humanity, Dr. Chen's message continued to play, speaking to visitors from 100 different worlds. We were human. We were here. And we mattered. Do not let us be forgotten. The galaxy had listened. And in listening, it had changed. Humanity had lost the war, but they had won something perhaps more important. They had taught the galaxy that being remembered was a form of immortality, and that even extinct species could shape the future through the memories they left behind. The archives floated in their orbits, powered by reactors designed to last 10,000 years, waiting patiently for the next visitor, the next species, the next empire that needed to learn why memory matters. And somewhere in deep space, hidden and safe, the last humans waited too, knowing that when they finally emerged, the galaxy would welcome them back. Not as warriors or threats or conquered people, but as the species that taught the universe how to remember.